Hello, hello, and welcome to the Ball and All podcast, which is your weekly basketball podcast that mostly focuses on the NBA. We do cover the WNBA and any other basketball related news around the world. And this is the third episode for the season, second one of the year, and we're right into it because it didn't take a month since the start of the NBA season for us to see the biggest trade that we'll probably get to see this season. It centered around James Harden. We all knew at the beginning of the season that James Harden was going to ask to be traded, and this is how the trade went down. And everyone was trying to figure out what Houston was going to do and everything else. And this show is going to unpack that and talk about the trade because there are four teams inside, and I think the other two teams actually won the jackpot. Yeah, but outside of that, please do like and subscribe to my YouTube channel, as well as please please do, as I've put it out there, and also please do follow and subscribe on Anchor, on Anchor the podcast, where the podcast is, or on iTunes. That's where the podcast is. So please do. Your support is greatly appreciated. I'm also a contributor to the postupzone.com. If you go there on the postup zone, you'll see I've written a piece about this. Those are my early thoughts. I've got a little bit more. That's why I've got the video. So if you go to postupzone.com, you'll find it right there, and I'll probably post the link to the story in the comment section in the description section of the video, so you can also read it and let me know what you think. But let's talk about this trade. Four teams are involved. Yes, everything that happened before. Let's start with that. Everything that happened before, James wanted out. He effectively had a great start to the season. I wrote about it. It was great. First week and a half, 2 weeks. After that, he had a 40-point, I think it was 40-point, 10 rebound game. And then after that, it just fell apart. I think he slowed down. It was on go slow. He looks very unfit. And he even went to the point where he was being a virus, essentially, in the locker room. He told, it was widely reported from his teammates who've been talking to the media that he effectively told them that they weren't good enough. He created a lot of drama in and around the team, and it was slightly unfair for Steven Silas in his rookie year. He didn't deserve that, but it kind of forced the move. And in his press conference against the Lakers this week, you kind of saw that he knew that it was coming, and he just wanted to give them that extra push to make the deal happen. At the time, throughout the past couple of days, it was always we kind of knew it was either the Sixers or Brooklyn. Sixers had put Ben Simmons on the table, but I think the deal didn't go through because the Sixers weren't willing to give up rookie Tyrese Maxey, who's had a great start to the season. He had a really good game in the game where they could only field 8, and he balled out, essentially. Everyone was making jokes that Dwight Howard was playing point guard, but Tyrese Maxey was doing a really great job there. So they weren't willing to let go of that. But on the other end, Brooklyn had to figure out a way to let everything go. And the news coming out of there was everything and anything was available to be traded except for Kevin Durant. And this is how it ended up. And I think Brooklyn just went all in with this trade. And this is how it ended up. So Brooklyn essentially received, there were four teams in this trade. Brooklyn received James Harden, obviously. Houston then then Brooklyn let go of Jared Allen, Taurean Prince, Karis LeVert, Dante Exum, and Rodion Kurucs. And those 5 players will go to different teams. What Houston received wasn't Karis LeVert or the 5 that I named. They received Victor Oladipo out of Indiana. And for that, Indiana received a second-round pick as well as Karis LeVert. So effectively, if you think about it, Houston had those 5 players. Houston then traded with Indiana for Oladipo, and they gave them Karis LeVert and a second-round pick. And then with having Jared Allen, Taurean Prince, Kurucs, and Dante Exum, they kept Exum and Rodion Kurucs because of the fact that they're an expiring contract, and Victor Oladipo is also on an expiring contract. He's in the final year of his contract, so obviously he'll be a free agent, and these two will be free. So that frees up cap space for Houston, and then Jarrett Allen and Taurean Prince were traded to Cleveland essentially for a first round pick, and it was a first round pick, and I think there was another second round pick, just confirming that. So the Cavs, it was a first round pick and a swap. So, and then Brooklyn gave up for James Harden, gave Houston 3 first round picks. So Houston ended up with 3 first round picks, four pick swaps. So it was 4 picks, 4 swaps in total. And essentially that's where that's their future. Brooklyn have now traded in their future for having a third star. So what it means is you've got Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, and James Harden at the Nets, which effectively should make them the team to beat across the NBA, because everywhere else in the NBA you've got duos, and the third star's always been the question of the third star's been the one who's going to take you over the hump. Now the Brooklyn have 3 stars, so they are a shoo-in. But what they've done in terms of this trade, and I feel that they've given up a lot. They gave up their best defender in Jarrett Allen. He was much better than DeAndre Jordan. He's got the most blocks and the most rebounds in that Brooklyn Nets team, and they just sold. And he played more minutes than DeAndre Jordan, so they've let that go. We all know, and we've seen DeAndre Jordan throughout his career. He doesn't play defense that well. He's more offense minded, and so that's going to be very tough for a team that has a big 3. And when you have a big 3, you kind of have to give up your depth. And that's what Brooklyn let go. Brooklyn let go of their depth. That depth was something that was intriguing, because you kind of felt that with Caris LeVert and Jarrett Allen coming off the bench, they probably had the best bench in the East and possibly had enough to compete with the 2 LA teams in the West, because you have KD, and also you've got these guys coming off the bench when the 2 LA, yes, the Lakers became better. The Clippers also kind of came better, but you kind of felt it was much more equal with that. With adding in James Harden, now they are the best defensive team in the league. I don't know how they're going to do it. They're going to have to find a way to share the ball, and I think if they use the Golden State Warriors model, that will be a lot better if they do it that way, because I think one of the 2 guards has to let go, or both guards actually have to give up a little bit of usage to Kevin Durant, because in signing in trading for Harden, you're trading for probably the highest usage player in the NBA over the past 7 years. Man, the ball lives in his hands, and he only gives it up to somebody he trusts. So now obviously he's got Kevin Durant, and they're recreating OKC. So you could probably gonna have to run your offense through Kevin and have James and Kyrie standing there for any double teams that come up, and that's going to make them so hard to beat, because you've got Kevin, you've got Kyrie, and you've got James, 3 players you would normally double team, but now you can't. So you're going to have to play them straight up, which means they're probably going to be unguardable, and that's what makes it so intriguing, because they will score lots of points on teams. But on the other end, here's the thing. On the other end, I don't think they've got enough protection to defend and to make stops. Joe Harris is great, and he'll probably be there as a sniper, 3-point shooter, but defensively, I don't think he's that great. They'll probably have Jeff Green in the lineup, who is a small ball 5. DeAndre Jordan has to pick up his minutes. He has to probably become a rim runner. I think what this trade has also done is that they've also created 3 spots on the Brooklyn roster for them to add pieces, and I think they'll add a center who can be a proper defensive presence, and share minutes with Jordan, and on top of that, add probably wing defenders to be able to help them defend at times. I think yes, in closing situations, all 3 will be on the court, but throughout the game, I think they'll have to stagger. Steve Nash will have to stagger the minutes. It's a massive headache, but it's a great headache to have. The other thing was obviously the relationship that James Harden had with D'Antoni, who was assistant coach at the Nets, and that's something also that's quite intriguing for those who are questioning this trade as to, okay, maybe the positive is that D'Antoni knows how to play James Harden, but the question is, will James get ISO ball, James ball, the same way he's done it? I don't think so, but he's still a very great scorer, one of the best in this generation as a scorer. So that's something that's important. Houston, on the other hand, have gone in probably into rebuild mode. Victor Oladipo's in the last year of his contract, so I don't think if he plays well and they extend him, that's probably great for them. But even if he doesn't, it's still okay because they'll have so much cap space. The only big player they'll probably have on their roster is John Wall. They've got, I think everyone else is going to become a free agent. They might extend Christian Wood or sign him again because he's had a great start to the season. Maybe even keep DeMarcus Cousins, but they'll have a lot of cap space as because obviously Dante Exum and Cruz are there just to fill out their roster as rotational players, and at the end of it all. But those 4 picks, those 4 first round draft picks are important. They're trying to rebuild and everything else. What this means, obviously, is for Brooklyn is that they're stuck for 4 years without a way to rebuild the side if, let's say, things go horribly wrong. And that's where it comes. And I think from a Brooklyn perspective, you kind of felt that they got pushed because of the way Kyrie has been acting over the past week, not arriving for games, not letting anybody know where he is, just saying he's not there for personal reasons. It is his job; he's employed, and I think that's the disappointing thing because you kind of added a lot. He added a lot more pressure on Steve Nash, and kind of forced Steve Nash and the Brooklyn Nets staff to kind of figure out another way. And so let's say Kyrie doesn't want to come back because Kyrie doesn't feel like his head is in basketball again. That still leaves them with James Harden and Kevin Durant with a bench that they can fill up because of 3 spots. So that kind of gives them, it still makes it drops them down to probably a 5th, 6th seed in the East. But if Kyrie comes in as your 3rd best player, that puts you up to 1 and 2. The problem obviously is defensively against Philadelphia, against Milwaukee. They can attack specific parts of your defense that are weak. And the problem is those 3, Kevin Durant can play defense. The other 2, I'm not so sure. But you can attack those other 2. You can also attack DeAndre Jordan. And you can also attack Joe Harris in that final death lineup. And so that's where that issue comes in. But for next season, if they can keep it all together and Spencer Dinwiddie comes in, they become a shoe-in and a lock for the title because I think Spencer Dinwiddie sends them over the top. He becomes the leader of the second unit. He's a scoring option on the second unit because right now they don't have a scoring option on the second unit unless if you either put Kyrie with the second unit or have James play with the second unit and get his minutes that way. He can start. He will carry on with the second unit until the second quarter. You bring on Kyrie and KD for the second part of the to close out the half, and you repeat it again. But obviously in the 4th quarter, you have all 3 on, and just you demolish teams that way. It's going to be high scoring for the Nets, and largely because they can't defend. So it'll be shootouts. So you'll be 134 player, 127 type of vibe, and so that's what it's going to. It's what it's going to be. The other 2 teams in the trade, the Cavs and the Pacers. The Pacers get a great replacement for Victor Oladipo, similar type of player, but with a lot more upside. And I think that's why I think they've won the jackpot. Victor Oladipo, we all know that he hasn't been happy in Indiana, and they get a similar player who's now getting minutes to start. He's been benching at Brooklyn, and I think it's his time to shine right now, and I think that's very good. Cleveland get another jackpot. They already, I think last week when we spoke, they were the best defensive team in the league. They added probably one of the better defending young centers in the league right now. That just makes it even worse. So what you're telling me is that the minutes at center for the Cleveland Cavaliers are locked down. You've got Andre Drummond, who's a great defender. You've got Jared Allen, who's a great defender. And you've also got JaVale McGee. So your 3 centers are locked. On top of that, you've got Larry Nance, Isaac Okoro. You've got as your defensive core, you've got Kevin Love there as well, and then you add that to the backcourt of Colin Sexton and Darius Garland. That if this trade effectively made them a playoff team, add that a good rotational player in Taurean Prince, they're a playoff team. You think Cleveland would be in the play-ins early on in the season? Yes. Now they're great. They're a playoff team with that defense. And I think they might end up being probably a top 5 defense. If they end up being top 10, they should be in the playoffs. So if they end up being a top 5, they become a tricky team to play in the playoffs. And I'm not even saying play in type of playoffs. I think they could make it in 7th seed, vibes. 7 seed gets you into play and you're in the playing tournament. That's the type of vibe. But I think they could stake a claim and cause a lot of problems right now in the East. So they've done really, really well. I think the final thing of this trade, and I think where it puts everyone else, now the question is on all the other teams in the East. Where do they see Brooklyn right now? I don't think they've improved. I think they've taken a massive step offensively, but they've taken a massive step defensively, and it kind of evens it out. They're the same level of threat, but but they constituted differently. And on top of that, with the Kyrie drama off the court, we don't know. And this whole specter of when is Kyrie coming back? He might not come back. He's literally gone AWOL. Yes, we know where he is, but nobody knows when he's coming back. And that also factored into this trade. It kind of felt like Brooklyn said, okay, fine, we need cover and insurance that at least we'll be a playoff team. And if we're a playoff team, we have a chance because we have probably an KD who's MVP caliber, and you've also got another MVP caliber guard in James Harden. Not saying Kyrie's not MVP caliber, but those two are just incredible. And it recreates something and gives them a chance. So that's ideally what I think that we're trying to get to with that. The other teams now obviously look for the next trade, and I think possibly the next trade might be Bradley Beal in terms of trying to figuring out if you want to send your team over the hump, what do you need to add? So, for instance, Milwaukee might want to think maybe bringing Bradley Beal in, making it a strong team. The cap might find themselves in cap hell, but it might be necessary. I don't know if they have the pieces to trade for him. Other teams in the Boston might consider maybe sending Kemba the other way and getting Bradley Beal in and making it possible. Obviously, Kemba's injured, so that's another story. But I think that now teams will need to figure out. And even now, right now with Brooklyn, they've gone all in, and it's a wait and see approach. They're gonna blast through the regular season, that I can tell you. But the question obviously is what's going to happen in the playoffs, and that's more important because obviously that's what this league is set up to be. And that I think if they win it, then this was worth it. If they don't, it brings in it brings in a lot more uncertainty, especially with them restricting themselves so much by letting go of so many picks. They're literally capped. They're really restricted until 2027. So it's going to be a tough time. And similar to when they got Kevin Garnett and Paul Pierce, they sent a lot of picks away, and they were in this hell up until 2 years ago, and 3 years ago, and they've been trying to build through the draft. They got Karis LeVert and Jared Allen, and I think Brooklyn fans might be upset that they're gone, but the excitement of a championship run is something that could send them over the hump. I think the two teams in the West who are shoe-ins, they'll be watching, and I think all the teams who are contenders are going to watch how this thing unfolds. I think Miami's still is starting slowly, but I think they're pretty. They have a very good squad, so roster. So that was the only other team that I thought maybe they could do something, and possibly even adding a Bradley Beal at the top could possibly work. Dragic, Tyler Hero, Dragic, Tyler Hero, maybe for Bradley Beal with a couple of salary fillers, maybe could work. I don't know if the salaries will work, but that's off the top of my head. But it's a wait and see approach. The trade deadline is, I think, a month away, a month or two away. So still a long way away. So teams will try to figure out what the recipe is and try to see how this Brooklyn team looks like. But it's going to be exciting basketball in New York. You might get a New York LA finals, which is something that everybody wants. I think TV, broadcaster, sponsors, everything. So that's what it is. That's my piece on this James Harden trade. A lot more will come out in the wash, and a lot of stories, and I'll try to bring it to you. But thank you very much for watching and also listening on the podcast. My name is Mpho Mutlani, and that's the end. And I'll sign off with Sale Kakahiso.